There's a kind of confidence that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't walk into a room demanding attention. It doesn't brag. It doesn't posture. It doesn't need to win the moment, the argument, or the audience. It simply exists, quietly, steadily, almost invisibly. Yet, you feel it the way you feel. Gravity, not because you can see it, but because everything around it responds. People who don't need to prove anything carry that kind of presence, and the truth is, it wasn't always this way for them. They weren't born calm or self-assured or untouchable. No one just wakes up with the ability to walk away from noise, to ignore provocations, to rise above insecurity. No, this kind of confidence is built in the dark, brick by brick, scar by scar, disappointment by disappointment, until one day they realize that silence is stronger than argument, that self-respect is louder than explanation, and that peace is more powerful than performance. Their quiet confidence is the aftertaste of wars no one saw. And if you met them years earlier, you wouldn't even recognize them. They used to be the kind of person who cared too much, who wanted to be understood, who wanted to be liked, who needed people to see the good in them. They explained themselves endlessly, defended their intentions, replayed conversations at night, wondering if they said something wrong, apologized to keep the peace, even when they weren't the ones who broke it. But somewhere along the line, something shifted. A breaking point arrived, not with rage or chaos, but with exhaustion. An exhaustion that seeped into their bones and whispered, "Enough." Enough trying to convince people with closed minds. Enough carrying relationships that collapse the moment you stop holding them up. Enough pouring energy into places where nothing grows. Enough explaining your heart to people committed to misunderstanding it. That moment of internal collapse was also the moment of awakening. They realized no one is obligated to understand them, no one is required to validate them, and the world does not give out medals for suffering or self-sacrifice. So slowly, painfully slowly, they stopped trying to prove anything, not because they stopped caring, but because they finally started healing. They learned that every explanation was a debt they owed to people who never offered the same in return. That being understood is not a requirement for existing, that silence saves more energy than justification. And that real confidence isn't loud, it's the ability to walk away from anything that insults your soul, without announcing your departure. And that's when people started noticing them, respecting them, wondering what changed. Because confidence built in the dark reflects differently in the light. Not shiny but grounded, not boastful but steady, not loud but undeniable. The people who don't need to prove anything aren't trying to be powerful. They just refuse to be drained by things that don't matter. They don't react to every slight, don't crumble under judgment, don't argue with ignorance. They let others misunderstand, misinterpret, and mislabel them because they know who they are, and they're finally at peace with it. Their confidence isn't a performance, it's a quiet understanding of their own worth. And it manifests in ways other people often misread, in how they don't rush to respond, how they pause before speaking, how they observe more than they reveal, how they no longer defend their choices, how they don't flinch when someone tries to provoke them. They've become comfortable with being misunderstood because peace matters more than proving they're right. And somehow, that makes them even more intimidating, not because they intend to be, but because nothing is harder to manipulate than someone who has nothing to prove. You can't shame them, they've already faced their own shame. You can't embarrass them, they've already confronted their flaws. You can't guilt-trip them, they've stopped apologizing for existing. You can't control them, they've cut the strings that once made them dance. You can't rush them, they learned patience in the trenches. You can't tempt them with attention. They've met silence and learned to love it. And the darkest, most poetic part is this. Their quiet confidence grew out of all the moments they were overlooked, all the times no one chose them, all the years they weren't valued, all the friendships where they were the giver, all the relationships where their heart was mishandled, all the broken promises they held on to alone, all the words they swallowed, all the times they shrank to make others comfortable. The world taught them that no matter how loudly they tried to prove their worth, someone would always doubt them, and that truth broke them, but it also rebuilt them. Because once someone stops seeking external approval, they become unstoppable, not in a loud or dramatic way, but in a quiet, unshakable way. In the way they choose themselves every morning, in the way they trust their intuition, in the way they stop chasing, in the way they stop fearing loss. in the way they refuse crumbs of affection, in the way they understand that distance can be a form of self-respect. Life didn't get easier. Their mind got quieter. And maybe that's the real confidence, a quiet mind in a loud world. A heart that doesn't need to prove its goodness, a soul that no longer fears being seen. They know what they bring, what they've survived, who they are becoming, and even if the world doesn't acknowledge it, they do. But here's where it deepens. Quietly confident people didn't just stop proving themselves to others. They stopped trying to prove themselves to their younger self, the one who always felt behind, inferior, unworthy. The one who believed they had to be more to deserve love. They had to grieve that version of themselves. The version that tried too hard. That believed effort equaled worth. That stayed in rooms where the love was conditional. They had to accept that no amount of proving can heal wounds created by people who never learned how to see them. The desire to prove is born from a raw hidden ache. The longing to be seen. But wanting to be seen by people who don't know how to look destroys you. They survived that destruction. They reached a point where the pain of performing became heavier than the fear of disappointing people. Where being misunderstood felt lighter than bending themselves into unnatural shapes. Where silence felt safer than explaining themselves to someone committed to judging them. That's when they realized some people don't misunderstand you. They misjudge you on purpose. And you can't win against someone whose mind is already made up. So they surrendered, not to others, but to themselves. And that surrender became their rebirth. They stepped into a life where peace mattered more than winning, boundaries mattered more than belonging, mental health mattered more than being liked, truth mattered more than acceptance, self-understanding mattered more than validation. This transformation wasn't cinematic. It was silent, lonely, painful, internal. It happened in the quiet moments, crying alone, choosing silence over confrontation, walking away trembling, grieving old versions of themselves, being called distant or cold by people who never understood what it cost them to choose peace. Quiet confidence is not built by victories. It's built by losses, the kind that force you to face who you are. It's built by nights whispering, "I'm tired of proving. I just want to be." It's built by mornings choosing not to respond to drama, not to explain, not to shrink. They stopped attending battles that demanded their dignity as the entry fee. They learned that sometimes the strongest response is no response. And as they evolved, the world started treating them differently. Not because the world changed, but because they did. People approached them with caution, not fear, but respect. People listened when they spoke, because they didn't speak often. People noticed their presence, because it wasn't desperate. People valued their silence, because silence from someone grounded feels like a statement. The less they proved, the more undeniable they became. Confidence becomes loudest when it no longer needs a voice. But let's be clear, this quiet confidence is not weakness. It's softness that survived the war. The softness of someone who knows their strength, but doesn't flaunt it. Someone who chooses peace because they have tasted chaos. Someone who could fight, but doesn't. Not out of fear, but out of mastery. They learned emotional discipline, detachment, how not to be provoked, how to see through manipulation, how to let people expose themselves, how to stop spending attention like it's cheap. When someone tries to pull them into drama, they remain still, and that stillness exposes the instability in others. Quiet confidence is a mirror, and not everyone likes what they see. People who don't need to prove anything often feel lonely. Not for lack of people, but because few can meet them where they are. It's hard to bond with someone whose ego still controls them. Hard to connect with someone who needs to win every conversation. Hard to open up to someone who sees vulnerability as weakness. Hard to be understood by people who only understand noise. Quiet confidence often creates quiet company, but that's a price they will pay because they finally learned that not everyone deserves access to them. Not their depth, not their explanations, not their energy, not their presence, not their forgiveness. So their circle becomes small, their boundaries tight, their honesty clean, their energy protected. To some they seem distant, but they're simply selective. Selective because they know the cost of being careless with their heart. Selective because peace is expensive. Selective because not everyone who smiles is safe. Quiet confidence is the courage to choose yourself without guilt, not selfishness, self-respect. The courage to say, "I don't need to prove my worth or intentions or goodness, or strength or value. I know who I am, quietly, deeply, fully, and that knowing changes everything. What people never understand is that quietly confident people didn't choose this path, they were pushed into it, forced by years of being misunderstood, judged before being known, forced by being the listener in rooms where no one ever listened back, forced by people who mistook their silence for weakness, forced by heartbreaks born from giving far more than they received. Quiet confidence is scar tissue of the soul, strengthened in places most people never look. There were times they wanted to scream, defend themselves, correct the lies, clap back, prove a point, but they didn't. Not because they couldn't, but because they finally saw the truth. Proving yourself is emotional debt that never gets repaid. No explanation will ever convince someone committed to misunderstanding you. No honesty will ever change someone committed to their version of you. So they stopped. They chose peace over performance, self-respect over validation, silence over noise, distance over forced closeness. And that's when people started asking, what changed? Why are you so calm? Why don't you react? Why don't you explain anymore? Because growth is always mistaken for mystery by those who never expected you to evolve. People who don't need to prove anything seem unpredictable. Not because they're unstable, but because they're no longer controlled by fear or ego. They don't run from difficulty, but they don't stay where they're not valued. They don't chase, don't try to fit in, don't justify their choices, their clarity won't allow it. The world is loud, but they move like a quiet flame, steady, self-contained, certain. This certainty isn't arrogance. It's the stillness that comes after surviving inner storms that would have drowned others. It's the stillness that comes after learning solitude is not loneliness. After accepting that not everyone deserves access to you. And maybe the darkest part of their transformation is this. They stopped wanting to be understood. Because wanting to be understood is a vulnerability, and they no longer hand people weapons disguised as explanations. They offer clarity to the right people, silence to the wrong ones. They don't debate with those who lack honesty. Don't defend boundaries to those who benefit from crossing them. Don't waste breath on those who hear only to reply. If someone misunderstands them, so be it. Doubts them, so be it. Underestimates them, so be it. Leaves, let them. Not out of indifference, but out of self-preservation. They have learned the power of walking away without guilt. Walking away from draining conversations, manipulative guilt, unbalanced relationships, opportunities that betray their values, chaos disguised as passion, responsibilities that were never theirs. They walk away with grace, and that grace confuses those who once controlled them through noise. The moment you stop needing to prove anything, you become untouchable. They no longer fear losing people. They fear losing themselves again. And if choosing themselves disappoints others, they choose themselves anyway. Quiet confidence can be isolating. When you stop needing attention, those who depended on your attention disappear. When you stop overgiving, those who fed on your generosity lose access. When you stop explaining, manipulators lose their entry point. When you stop proving loyalty, people who relied on your fear of abandonment lose their power. As your world becomes quieter, your circle becomes smaller, your boundaries stronger, your standards higher. People will say you changed, became distant, but they'll never admit they pushed you there. They'll never admit your silence is a response to their behavior. Your distance, a reaction to their disrespect, your boundaries proof of their carelessness. And you, wiser, quieter, stronger, won't explain any of it. Explanations are for people who care. Silence is for those who don't. And walking away is for those who never deserved you. Quiet confidence doesn't need applause or dominance or arguments. It's not built on comparison but on acceptance. Acceptance of your flaws, past wounds, worth. And when someone has accepted themselves fully, the world loses its power to shake them.